It's almost phenomenal just to think about the power that the waves have. And sometimes you just go out to the coast, you just see the surface just pounding, pounding, pounding.
There's just so much energy. Everything is changing. The beach changes, the waves change, the ecosystem changes. From seconds to minutes to hours to years, everything is changing.
Along the Oregon coast, powerful waves have reshaped the shoreline for centuries. Winds, astronomical forces, and seismic events transfer their energy into the water. And the waves carry this energy thousands of miles across the Pacific before finally breaking along the shoreline. Just 60 miles inland, engineers at Oregon State University have brought these ocean waves into the lab. Since 1972, researchers have used the O.H. Hinsdale Wave Research Laboratory to study everything from tsunamis and storm surge to capturing wave energy.
We have researchers from all over the world come to do projects here.
It's exciting because every single project is different. There is absolutely nothing that has been done identically 2 times.
Yeah!
Today, engineers come to the Hinsdale lab driven by 2 pressing questions. How can we protect coastal communities from the destructive force of waves? And how can we harness that same energy to help power the future?